Hello, and welcome to the This Happened Today in History podcast for April 1st. I am your host, Mr. Miller. This podcast will cover a number of topics that happened on this date in history. Please visit the podcast webpage at thishappenedtoday.buzzsprout.com. There you can download the notes page, which will help you organize the information as well as develop your own ideas on how these events changed the world around us. If you are interested in hearing more, please consider subscribing so you will not miss out on what happens tomorrow in history. In 1918, the Royal Air Force was founded in England. The aircraft used in 1918 when the RAF started included the Sopwith Pup, Bristol F-2B fighters, Sopwith Camels, and a Royal Aircraft Factory SE-5s. The strength of the RAF in November of 1918 was nearly 300,000 officers and airmen and more than 22,000 aircraft. At the outbreak of World War II, in September of 1939, the operational strength of the RAF in Europe had diminished to about 2,000 aircraft. In June of 1940, Western democracies of continental Europe fell to Germany one by one, leaving Britain all alone in its resistance to Nazi Germany. Nazi leader Adolf Hitler planned an invasion of Britain, and in July 1940 ordered his powerful air force, the Luftwaffe, to destroy British ports along the coast in preparation. The outnumbered RAF flyers put up a fierce resistance in the opening weeks of the Battle of Britain, leading the Luftwaffe commanders to place destruction of the British air fleet at the forefront of the German offensive. If the Germans succeeded in wiping out the RAF, they could begin their invasion as scheduled in the fall. During the next 3 months, however, the RAF successfully resisted the massive German air invasion, relying on radar technology, more maneuverable aircraft, and exceptional bravery. For every British plane shot down, 2 Luftwaffe warplanes were destroyed. In October, Hitler delayed the German invasion indefinitely, and in May 1941 the Battle of Britain came to an end. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill said of the RAF pilots, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." By the war's end in 1945, the strength of the RAF was nearly 1 million personnel. Later this number was reduced and stabilized at about 150,000 men and women. In 1946, at 4:28 a.m., an 8.6 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Unimak Island in Alaska's Aleutian Islands, generating a tsunami that created the greatest damage and number of deaths in Hawaii's history, leading to the creation of the United States' first tsunami warning system. As is typical for dangerous tsunamis, the greatest wave heights were nearest the epicenter. The waves reached as high as 42 meters, or about 138 feet, on Unimak Island and destroyed its lighthouse and killed the 5 people there. Elsewhere, the tsunami caused the greatest damage and number of deaths on inhabited Pacific islands. In Hawaii, the waves reached about 17 meters, or 55 feet high, and killed 158 people, most in the town of Hilo. In North America, the highest waves were in California at just over 2 meters, or just over 8 feet, and killed 1 person there, and in South America it killed 1 more person in Peru. A tsunami warning system did not exist in 1946, and no one had any warning of the approaching dangerous waves. In response to this event, the United States government set up its first tsunami warning operation at the Honolulu Magnetic and Seismic Observatory in 1948 to mitigate tsunami hazards in Hawaii. This facility would later be renamed Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, PTWC, and expand its mission to include the rest of the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. In 1970, President Nixon signed into law the banning of cigarette advertising on television and radio. The bill, signed into law by President Richard Nixon on April 1st of 1970, was the product of over 5 years of efforts to curb the public health crisis posed by smoking, as well as a continual power struggle between an executive agency, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Congress, over which branch had the authority to impose such a ban on cigarette advertising. During the spring of 1969, hearings in the Commerce Committee wore on as dozens of health organizations, medical researchers, and tobacco company representatives testified on their views of the proposed ban. Near the end of the spring, Congressman Staggers commented to the press that these were the longest hearings he had witnessed in nearly a decade of serving on the Commerce Committee. The House passed its version of the legislation in June of 1969, sending the measure to the Senate. A conference committee reconciled the Senate and House versions of the legislation, leading to its final passage in the spring of 1970. In its final form, the bill imposed a ban on all cigarette advertising on radio and television, mandated that tobacco companies include a warning on their packaging stating that the Surgeon General has determined that cigarette smoking is dangerous to your health. and prohibited states or local governments from making laws concerning cigarette advertising. The last provision of the bill addressed the regulatory authority question, which had lingered in this debate over the previous 6 years. Regulatory agencies would have to notify Congress 6 months in advance of imposing any new policies on cigarette advertising. Since the passage of the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act in 1970, additional regulations have cracked down on print and billboard advertising of cigarettes. You have been listening to the This Happened Today in History podcast for April 1st. I thank you for listening, and I hope that you have enjoyed learning about the historical events from the past. Thank you to the following websites for the information regarding today's topics: thepeoplehistory.com, history.com, noaa.gov, and thebirdcenter.org. The music used as the background track for this podcast is Americana, created by Kevin MacLeod on Incompetech.com. If you enjoyed this information and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing, as this will keep the historical events in your feed in the morning for each day. I hope you have a great day.